Cultural competence and humility. Can we all level up? A good friend of mine that we'll call Sam for the story recently told me about an awful day that they were having. So, as the details unfolded, I couldn't help but think that some cultural competence and humility in the workplace could have gone a very long way in this situation. So, to explain what these two concepts are and how they're relevant to the story, let me tell you what happened with Sam. Sam's day got off to a really bad start. They dropped off their child at preschool and they were on their phone with a loved one who was in the hospital. And that was not enough. Sam was running late for a meeting and it was an 8 a.m. one. In the morning, it gets hectic. And as they um, pulled into the parking lot, they had to deliver some bad news to a client and they were quite nervous. So they pulled up next to a parked car and scraped it. So it was not a hit and run. They did scrape the car. Someone saw the incident happen, but Sam had to rush and get to the meeting with the client. So as they were rushing to the meeting, they called their agent, their insurance agent, and reported this and were trying to figure it out. But they figured they would fix it after the meeting. As all this happened, there was another side to the story. A bystander in this parking lot saw this and immediately contacted the owner of the car. And so when Sam came out of the meeting, everyone was upset at Sam, and the news had spread throughout the whole company. And outside of Sam's office, the representative from Human Resources was there, confronted Sam, and the whole thing took a pretty different spin. And the perception, as you can imagine, on the other side was different at what happened to the parking lot. So that leads me to believe is what assumptions did the bystander make? What questions did the HR representative not ask? And how did they both start accusing Sam? They didn't know what I just told you, the background behind the story. Did everyone assume that Sam's behavior was in the parking lot was irresponsible and arrogant? So let's look at an incident through the lens of cultural competence and humility. My good friend and LinkedIn instructor, Mary Frances Winters, talks about she's a distinguished author in the field and of including inclusion and diversity. And she says how we resolve conflict and how we view the world is often based on culture. Many of us operate in a culture of instant assumptions. So the bystander in this case in the parking lot assumed that Sam was irresponsible and made poor decisions. And an important detail that I left out here is that until Sam was in that position, Sam was in an administrative role, so in the management side of the company, and the person that Sam hit was on the factory line side of the company. So there was a little bit of conflict and assumptions made there as well. So Mary Frances has developed the 4E model of cultural competency: exposure, experience, education, and empathy. And she talks about us handling situations like this through the lens of the 4Es. She encourages everyone to listen to our cultural assumptions and ask questions and learn about others before we make those assumptions. This incident did not involve people from two different cultures, but the HR representative should have still benefited from the 4Es and of making assumptions. Mary Frances has a course on LinkedIn Learning, and we'll put the link in the comments here called Cultural Competence and Inclusion. And she recommends empathy and understanding instead of jumping into the judgment role. This can often help us face our own unconscious bias and stereotypes we have for other groups. Have you ever caught yourself assuming you know a person's story or jumping to a conclusion before you know actually the background of the person, or you assume that the person was ill-willed immediately? As we learn, and if we take this course, there's no end to this process. It's just a continuous learning process. I also have a course on LinkedIn Learning on cultural humility and the concept that emphasizes the importance of individuals and groups approaching cultural interactions with an open and respectful and self-reflective attitude. So I reference a dynamic that play out in groups, people who share common characteristics and interests and affiliations and values. And that leaves everyone out on the outside. That's the out group. And the protagonist in my story, Sam, uh, uh, it's not Sam, but the human resources representative. The human resources representative is making these assumptions. They would need to operate respectfully with genuinely trying to understand the circumstances. Now, you see me tracking a little bit, but what I'm telling you is in a newsletter, LinkedIn newsletter called Stronger that I post. And I like to make some YouTube's posts about this as well on each topic. So I talk about a course that has three applied scenarios that learners get to dissect and dissect, and you can see these in the link that we're going to share um, in the rest of the YouTube comments. So thankfully, Sam's challenging episode was resolved when the manager stepped in to demonstrate some of the behaviors that Mary Frances and I outline in our courses. The manager listened to the stories. The manager came to the rescue, really. They listened to the stories, they considered both perspectives, and they diffused the conflict. So the actions that the manager took helped preserve Sam's reputation, and in this case, simplified the insurance process with the car repair. Employing some cultural humility is always appropriate and an oftenly useful capacity of relating to others with respect. So, without displaying an attitude of superiority or without reacting to the other oriented approach. So, I ask you to, when you see a challenging situation and you see some conflict, try not to jump to assumptions, try to ask some questions, try to know how you usually react, and try to use some of that cultural competence and humility to interact with others. Thanks for listening. Oh, goodness, we recorded all of this? Oh, God.